In a remote mountain inn, there was one room that no guest ever stayed in for long, room 6. The innkeeper, a kind but tight-lipped man named Walter, refused to speak of why. No one stays in there, he'd say simply, and for years, the room remained locked. But one winter, a lone traveler named Daniel arrived at the inn, seeking shelter from a brutal snowstorm. The inn was nearly full, and Walter hesitated before saying, "I have one room left, but it's not ideal." "I'll take it," Daniel replied without hesitation. He wasn't afraid of ghost stories, and besides, a warm bed was better than freezing to death outside. Walter reluctantly handed over the key. "Don't look in the mirror after midnight," he warned quietly. Daniel chuckled as he climbed the creaky stairs. What a ridiculous rule, he thought. The room itself was plain, a bed, a dresser, and an old, tall mirror framed in ornate, tarnished silver. The storm howled outside as Daniel settled in, reading a book by the fire. Around 11:45, the wind rattled the window so fiercely he got up to secure it. As he did, he caught his reflection in the mirror and froze. There was something wrong. His reflection was smiling, but he wasn't. He stared for a moment, convinced he must be imagining things, and the reflection returned to normal. Shaking his head, he laughed nervously and got into bed. But sleep didn't come easily. The storm outside seemed to grow quieter as the room grew colder. At exactly midnight, Daniel's eyes snapped open, and he felt a strange pull, like he was being drawn toward the mirror. Against his better judgment, he sat up and looked. The mirror wasn't reflecting the room anymore. Instead, it showed a dark, endless hallway lit by flickering candles. And there was movement, shapes shifting in the shadows, too far away to make out. Suddenly, one of the shapes turned. It was a figure, its face pale and hollow-eyed, grinning too wide for a human mouth. Daniel's heart pounded as the figure began walking toward the glass. He tried to look away but couldn't. He was frozen, his body no longer under his control. The figure stopped just inches from the other side of the mirror, and Daniel saw its mouth move, though no sound came out. Then the mirror cracked. Daniel snapped out of his trance, stumbling back. The crack was small, but it was spreading like spider webs, each fracture leaking a thin, inky black liquid that dripped onto the floor. As it pulled, the shadows in the room deepened. And then, a hand shot out of the mirror. Daniel screamed, bolting for the door. It wouldn't open. The black liquid was spreading across the walls, and he could feel something behind him, cold, skeletal fingers brushing the back of his neck. He pounded on the door, yelling for help, until finally it flew open. Walter stood there, pale and trembling. He didn't need to ask what had happened. Daniel never spoke of that night, but as he left the inn the next morning, he glanced back at room 6. The door was wide open, and through it, he saw the mirror, its surface perfectly smooth, as though nothing had happened. But in its reflection, he swore he saw himself still standing in the room, grinning that awful, unnatural grin.